And back at it here with the Cottman Corner podcast. With you, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, co founder of Baseball Prospectus. Rob and Rany on the Royals, co author there, and Rany on the Royals. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. You can check out my show at 810WHB.com. And a lot to get to here with the Royals as we tape right now. If you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, we normally are Sundays at 10 o'clock, but we're going to 10 o'clock on a Monday because of the holidays. Give everybody a chance to have family. That extra, Sunday was like a Saturday yesterday, so we didn't want to infringe upon anybody's time. So we're going a little bit late on a Monday here, but you can catch us normally Sundays at 10 p.m. if you want to be part of the stream, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of it. You can comment in the chat room if you want on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch as well. So if you subscribe to those channels, you can be a part of the conversation as we have it. As Matt, by the way, Matt checked in. I did a podcast earlier tonight as well, my Chiefs podcast. I'll give a little plug for it. Red Golden Bowl with Jeff Chadilla and Eric Eager. Eric Eager from PFF and Jeff Chadilla from NFL Network. And Matt was there with us. He's at the game. He is at the Royals game right now, and he was streaming both Red Golden Bowl, and now he's streaming Coffin Corner. So Matt, number one fan.
That is devotion.
Yeah, it goes to Matt at the game and coming to us here with the podcast. Cottman, Cam is in. Got a lot of folks joining in right now, and again, you can be part of the conversation. By the way, if you want to go see Matt, 420 DD C23. That's where he's at Kauffman Stadium. Which let's lead with this, Rany. You will be in Kansas City coming up this weekend, and with our buddy Joe Sheehan as well, right?
I will. I try to make my annual trip pilgrimage to the Kauffman Stadium. But the big news is, as you mentioned, my longtime friend Joe Sheehan, who I've known for 30 years and started Baseball Prospectus with 27 years ago, has never been to Kansas City. It's one of only, I don't know, maybe half a dozen stadiums that he has not been to. And that drought is about to end. He is making his first ever trip to Kansas City. So for all of you out there who have listened to Joe be pessimistic about our Royals for the last quarter century, and for 2 of those 25 years was wrong. And we'll just ignore the other 23 years where he was right and I was wrong. But if you want to give him a piece of your mind for what he's said about the Royals over the years, this is your opportunity.
Market. He's a Yankee fan.
Yes, exactly.
Market guy. People have heard my radio show. I have Joe on a semi-regular basis, and we often will end up debating that. So if you want to go defend the honor of your Kansas City Royals, you're saying now is the time to
Kansas City Royals, Kansas City, the Midwest, the Great Plains. You don't have to defend barbecue, though. That is the one thing that Joe will absolutely not criticize and is extremely excited to try. And we already have a wide array of restaurants to introduce him to. So we'll be hitting all the classics. We'll be hopefully checking out the Negro Leagues Museum. And various other sites around town. So Operation Show Joe, the real Kansas City, is going to begin Friday morning and proceed in earnest all weekend. So we will be out at the ballpark, hopefully for all 3 games. And I'm thinking Saturday in particular, we'll let everyone know where we might be sitting. And if you want to join us, if there's sufficient interest, we might even try and get a group together and all sit together in the bleachers or somewhere in the stadium. I have a feeling that there are plenty of seats available at Royals games, particularly the weekend that the Chiefs open. So hopefully we'll see you guys at the ballpark this weekend. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to Joe getting a piece of the mind of many, many angry Royals fans, even if we know deep down in our heart that he's usually right about our team. And our anger should really be placed at the hands of the front office and not at the messenger who tells you like it is.
Yeah. And when we say, go get Joe a piece, he's a great guy, great baseball fan. Knowledgeable baseball fan, and don't go sweating Joe. Don't be a jackass. Represent Kansas City the way we normally do.
Fans I have no doubt.
They leave Kansas City going, hey, it was great. Everybody was great to us. Let's make sure Joe Sheehan leaves Kansas City saying the same thing.
At the very least, I know he will leave Kansas City stuffed, because we're planning to eat a lot this weekend, and I have no doubt the food will be up to snuff. I expect the Midwest hospitality will be as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Joe will have a great time, and looking forward to talking to you guys. We'll have you in on Friday, as a matter of fact, on the show, talking some Royals baseball. As you guys are going to stop by the studio, so if you're a fan of the podcast, you're outside of town, make sure 810whb.com or the 810 app. You'll be able to hear Rany and Joe in with us on Friday when they come to town to see the Kansas City Royals. We got a lot we want to talk about here today, Rany. We want to get into Bobby Witt Jr. 2020, right? He is fulfilling the promise and having an outstanding, at least in the counting categories, rookie season. We're going to talk about what his upside is, where we'd like to see the Royals go in free agency. If there's one guy you could grab, who is it? How many of the guys on this team right now are actually part of what will be the next playoff team for the Kansas City Royals? Let's start with Bobby Witt Jr., though. 2020 season. For Bobby Witt Jr. How excited should Royals fans be that they're seeing what they're seeing, and what do you think the upside is for him now that you've seen almost a full season out of the kid?
Look, I like Bobby Witt Jr. a lot. I think he's the most promising young player he's the most valuable property in the entire franchise, right? I think he has a better chance of becoming a superstar than anyone else in this organization. But I will say I feel like I need to be the negative Nelly here who slows the brakes just a little bit on the hype surrounding the 2020 accomplishment, which yes is a very rare thing for a rookie. And you mentioned it, the counting stats: home runs, stolen bases. From a kid who's barely 22 years old, I feel like people have just kind of making this assumption that, he's clearly had a great rookie season, and so he doesn't even have to improve all that much in order to become a star. And I feel compelled to point out that when you add up all of his contributions, he hasn't had a great rookie season. Certainly, he has shown flashes of greatness. Certainly, he has shown the tools that are a prerequisite for greatness, but there are two things that he still has a lot to work on. And I'm going to illustrate this with a couple of other 2020 statistics, specifically the 2020 statistics. And by that, I mean the 20 home runs, yes, the 26 stolen bases, I believe he has. But also, he barely has 20 in the walks column. He has 25 walks. I think he has 25th today. And I looked up, he is the 13th rookie in Major League history to have to go 2020, 20 home runs, 20 steals. Of the 13 players, he has easily the fewest walks in their rookie season. He's at 25 after taking a walk today. The next fewest is actually Julio Rodriguez, who's having a 2020 season of his own as a rookie. He's at 34, but he has a month to go, so he'll probably move that up. Next on the list is Nomar Garciaparra, who had 35 walks in his 2020 season. 35 is, that certainly didn't keep Nomar from becoming a star for several years, but Nomar also hit 306 and slugged over 500. He had 85 extra base hits as a rookie. So the point is that almost all the other guys on that list, Carlos Beltran had 46 walks, almost double where Bobby Witt is with 3 weeks to go in the season. Mike Trout, of course, had 67. Mitchell Page, of all people, had the most at 78 walks, but Mitchell Page was also 25 years old as a rookie, was a finished product. So Bobby Witt is one of the younger guys on this list. The only guys younger are Julio Rodriguez and Mike Trout, but the walks are a concern. And we've talked about how good the Royals have become at developing plate discipline. He actually has one of the lowest walk rates of all of the young players that have come up. When you look at Pasquantino and Prado, obviously MJ Melendez has a walk rate of 12.5%. Witt is down there around 6%, and he does need to work on that. I think he's finally in an organization that will help him in that regard. And the best thing I will say about his walk rate is that while he doesn't walk a lot, his strikeout rate is actually a point lower than it was as a minor leaguer last year. The thing I was worried most about him was that the strikeout rate would jump to 30 or 35%. And he's kept it right around 24 not even 25, 23, 24%, which is a really significant development. His strikeout rate is around league average, maybe even slightly better than league average as a rookie with really good power. So that's the lesser of my two concerns.
Okay.
All right.
The lesser. What is the bigger?
The greater concern is the 2020 negative 20 club, which is 20 home runs, 20 steals, negative 20 defensive runs saved. And that is a pretty rare list in itself, which is in the history of baseball. He is the 12th player, rookie or otherwise, 12th player, period, to have 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and yet be negative 20 runs defensively. We've talked about this before. His defensive metrics at shortstop are terrible. Negative 16 runs there in barely, not even half a season, like 70. I think he played 76 games at shortstop, half a season, 16 runs below. He's not as bad at third base, but the numbers are still negative. He's the first.
Go ahead.
I was going to say he's the first player since 2008 to have 20 home runs, 20 steals, and negative 20 runs. And if you look at the other players on this list, I sorted it by age, because an old guy who's still hitting for power and has some speed but has lost defensive ability is one thing. But for a player his age to be poor defensively, the next youngest guy on the list, he's the youngest player on that list, but Hanley Ramirez, remember Hanley Ramirez, is the next youngest. Hanley Ramirez, tremendous offensive player, power, speed, everything, was a terrible defensive shortstop for pretty much his entire career, and it really hurt his value. There are, the other guys on this list that are young. Derek Bell, Fernando Tatis Sr., funnily enough, is the other guy on those are the other two guys on this list who are under the age of 25, showed the power and speed you want, but not defense. None of those guys became good defenders. It's only one season. There's a lot that can happen. He is a rookie. The other guys were not rookies when they did this. He can improve. But that is until I see evidence that his defensive metrics start to match the tools. And look, he made an incredible play yesterday on the ball off the mound that came down. He barehanded it through to first. He made an excellent play in the ninth inning today, a completely different play at third base where he ranged right down the line, got up, and then threw a bullet across the entire infield and nabbed the runner at first base. This tools are absolutely there for him to be better. I think it's notable both of those plays came at third base. I really think the Royals need to stop moving him around between third base and shortstop. They keep one of the additional problems with having Hunter Dozier on this roster is they feel compelled to play Bobby Witt at shortstop twice a week so that Hunter Dozier can get his reps at third base. And not being able to play the same position day after day after day, I think is not good for Bobby Witt's defensive development. Stick him at one position. I think it should be third base. Stick him there and let him play and let him develop the skills at that one position. And let's see some defensive success before we start thinking about moving her all around the infield.
Well, that to me is, and not to go to the whip early here tonight, but having a vision for how this team is going to fit together before guys have put 700 at bats in the big leagues on the board. Like, why is it that Bobby would, you had Mondesi at short. You think Mondesi's better. You thought he was better coming into this year because you started him at shortstop and had Bobby Witt at third. Why wasn't Bobby? This is my frustration with the whole Mondesi thing and why, like, when you can't figure out what to do with the guy, you get rid of him. Somewhere along the way, when you just go, look, new place, new change of scenery, we'll get what we can get along the way. Because I'm, and if anybody's just joining us now, I said last week, look, if you're this fascinated with Adalberto Mondesi, sign him for 3-year deal and get 2 years into the free agency. Like, if you're committed to the guy, then you're about ready to watch him walk. And I'm virtually willing to guarantee he has an outstanding season next year. But if you have believed in him at short all along, why wasn't Bobby Witt Jr. Identified as being a substandard shortstop, which he clearly is at the big league level? Why weren't you able to see that? And why wouldn't he move to third immediately? Bryce Harper was drafted as a catcher and immediately moved to the outfield. They went, this is it. We're not jerking you around behind the dish and messing with your hitting. We got a vision for what we want, and we're putting you in the outfield. And here we go. Why does that never seem to happen for the Royals until they get to the big leagues? I mean, that is the thing that's so mesmerizing to me. And to your point about Hunter Dozier, yes, I mean, and that door is open because they've continued to play him at short. And if they had left that, Mike Moustakas got moved off short almost immediately, right? And maybe it's because he's more of a bad body guy, right? Like Mike Moustakas, no one was ever going to, if you're going to have a
He certainly
swimsuit
didn't
company.
have Witt's speed. I mean, Witt is one of the fastest, if not the fastest player in baseball. And,
Yeah.
and like, I can understand the fast. I can understand the thinking. Oh, gee, he has the skills. But look, at some point, you have to acknowledge the numbers aren't there. You don't even have to like close the door on him as a shortstop in the future, but like let him have some success at one position, the less demanding position where he has shown better, better metrics. And if he succeeds there, you can always move him later in his career. But to me, you mentioned Adelbar Mondesi. There's also the fact that in Nicky Lopez, they had a guy who was already showed last year he was a good defensive shortstop. Like, you didn't have to move Witt to shortstop. You started him this season at third base. If they had just left him there for the whole season, I wonder if he would have had completely, acceptable defensive numbers there and shown development, learning different angles, because he did play mostly shortstop in the minor leagues. He needs reps at third base in order to, read the ball off of the bat a little. It's different at third base, your reaction times compared to shortstop.
There's a couple of questions because about like, well, what could he work on to get better at short? Right. Or are you convinced that these numbers tell the story that it's just never going to happen? Because a number of folks have said, and I agree, and I've wanted the same thing about Adalberto Mondesi all along. And everyone, when I say, well, move him to the outfield, and everyone's like, well, I don't get where moving him to the outfield, I mean, takes anything off his leg. I'm not worried about taking anything off his legs. I'm worried about getting a guy you can depend upon at short, because it's the most important defensive position. Irrelevant. I'm not worried about how many games Mondesi plays if I move him off short. I'm just getting him out of the way for the Royals to find a guy. The way they talked, I thought it was this guy, Bobby Witt Jr. That was it. And it was a huge red flag, and I said it at the time. They're moving him to third. I mean, and I thought, okay, and there, everyone said, well, it's just like Alex Bregman. He'll play third when he's not there, and then he'll move over. It's not like Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman's better. Okay, he handles both those positions. But like a lot of people have suggested, with that speed, why not the outfield? Why not straight out to center field? Why wasn't that the move? And think about it. And I think everyone's encouraged, and you've pointed it out very early on with the minor league minute, that Drew Waters, it was doing fairly well over in Atlanta and immediately did much better in Kansas City. And maybe that's the answer. But what could you have gotten for that pick if you already had a center fielder and it was Bobby Witt Jr.? Like, could that trade have been something different or something else that you needed, right? Could it have been for a starting pitcher, right? I don't know what it is, but again, figuring out your own guys is not their strength.
I mean, I'm not personally ready to move him to center field yet, although I think that is an incredible backup plan. Like, as a general skill set, you take a guy who has the fastest player in baseball. Center field at Cottman Stadium, mind you, seems like a pretty good fit for that skill set. But playing the infield is harder than playing the outfield, and therefore it's a more scarce skill set. If he can develop into an above average defensive infielder on either side of the left side of the infield, third base or shortstop, I still think he's going to have more value there. To me, the thing with trading for Drew Waters is if you move him to center field, okay, maybe you don't have to go after Drew Waters, although that looks like a really good trade. So maybe it's the best thing they did. But then you're out of third baseman. Like, I actually feel like the Royals had a more acute need for third base because, frankly, Hunter Dozier is not cutting it. Now, here's the other flip side of the Hunter Dozier commitment is just the open wound in on the Royals' leg that just won't heal. Is if they didn't have Hunter Dozier, would they have kept Emmanuel Rivera around instead? Like, did they trade when they traded Emmanuel Rivera? On this podcast, I said, you know what? If they've evaluated him, I have some faith in the fact that the Royals seem to be doing a much better job of developing hitters, and so the fact that they deemed him expendable, I didn't come down too hard on it. I'm like, yeah, they're trading a guy who's a rookie for a guy with 1.5 years of major league service time left before he's a free agent. But if they've evaluated Emmanuel Rivera and they don't think he's an everyday guy, then maybe getting a reliever is still good value for him. Well, I may have given the Royals way too much credit there, because maybe they didn't trade Emmanuel Rivera because they evaluated him and said, this guy's not a major leaguer, because he's sure as hell looks like a major leaguer since he went to Arizona. Maybe they traded him because they wanted to keep Hunter Dozier around and they just didn't think they had the roster space, and they chose Hunter Dozier over Emmanuel Rivera. And that, to me, is reason alone to move on from the Hunter Dozier contract, eat the sunk cost that it is, and admit that committing to him was a mistake. And because not admitting that it's a sunk cost has led us to this position where they traded a guy who might be an everyday third baseman for a reliever who has looked terrible since he joined the Royals and has one more year on his contract, even if he is good. So, at this point, Bobby Witt's probably the best third baseman in the organization, the best option at that position, at least until and unless Caden Wallace proves himself as a top prospect, and that may happen. But in the meantime, if they move him to center field, then they're just opening up a new hole at third base, and that they don't have anybody to fill that hole at this point.
Is Hunter Dozier really the biggest problem? I mean, I get your point where you're saying if they're moving, Bobby Witt Jr. off third base because they want to get at bats for him, but I mean, somebody explained to me that Ryan O'Hearn.
Well, that one's that's like the pitching coach who will not be named. I'm just under the assumption that as of October, whatever the final day of the regular season is, that will cease to be a problem. Maybe I'm giving the Royals too much credit there too, but the difference is Hunter Dozier is under contract for 2023 and under contract for 2024, and it's going to be much easier for the Royals to keep him around and claim that they have a good reason to, which is, yes, he's under contract. And I would argue that that's a mistake. But absolutely, if they bring back Ryan O'Hearn, I just can't even imagine that happening at this point. So leave it at that.
I can. I don't know that the Royals can imagine a world that doesn't have O'Hearn and Hunter Dozier in it. Can you? They love these guys.
Well, it's the Buddy Bell quote come to life, right? I never say it can't get worse. So yeah. I suppose I should never rule out that the Royals can't take a bad decision and make it worse by committing to it. And that is sort of a microcosm of one of the Royals' core issues, which is they compound mistakes by not acknowledging them and not moving on from them.
Because for me, if you just got rid of Ryan O'Hearn, Hunter Dozier could play that role. And then when you look at the numbers, they don't look as bad if he's just the pinch hitter fill-in guy.
Well, they're different roles. I mean, he's left-handed versus right-handed, right? O'Hearn can't play third base. As just a pinch hitter on the bench, that certainly limits how much he can hurt you. But even in that role, especially now that you have Pasquantino and Nick Pratto and a whole bunch of other young players, how many guys are you even going to be pinch hitting for? I just don't feel like there's enough at bats to go around, and anything you pay that guy above the major league minimum is I feel like money wasted, because you could bring up anybody from the minor leagues, and with any rookie who's going to be paid the major league minimum, and I think any minor leaguer you pull out of Omaha is going to somehow be capable of matching Ryan O'Hearn's 60 OPS plus. Let's not forget just how bad he's been. Anybody can do that role.
They never stop on a post game interview when he does get a hit, to always mention it, to always champion that he got a base hit, and it's to me it's hysterical, frankly.
Let me get. It looks like did he just get a pinch hit while we've been having this conversation?
He may have. The Royals are alive.
Yes, I see it here. Single to left in the 10th inning. Okay, well, he's been fine in that pinch hit role, but that's why I like to look at season long numbers. He's still hitting 223. His batting average is up to. His on base is in the 270s. His slugging is under 300. This is a first base / DH with an OBP and a slug under 300 each.
It's
You know,
not going to be enough. They got a safe call. Nick Prado trying to beat out an infield hit is initially called safe. I think they're going to review it. He'll be called out. And the game will be over, so it won't be. Hit the ball over the wall, Ryan O'Hearn. That's what you need. That's what Matt Stairs did. That's what helped. David McCarty did it 20 years ago. Would pinch hit and would hit the ball over the wall
well,
and
he's hit
have
one home run all season. And
It's staggering to me how it is. I'm curious because I'm looking here. I was looking at Hunter Dozier's contract. Are you aware of some of these things? So he's due $7.25 million next year and $9 million in 24. Right in 24, if he has 1,575 plate appearances between 21 and 23, then that goes up by $1.5 million. So I'm like, where is he right now? Right now, on plate appearances, they seem to be, pumping the brakes because they're aware of that. Because he right now has 987.
Yep.
So he is right on pace to even jack that up. I mean, I assume they'll just keep, pumping the brakes on that, but and make sure that he doesn't get another $1.5 million. But can you really see a scenario where they eat what would be $16.25 million?
No, I don't. But which is why I won't say the single most important thing. I mean, that would be the pitching coach I won't name, but I think the single most surprising, in a good way, thing the Royals can do this winter is to let Hunter Dozier go. Because if they do that, they are acknowledging that they've made a mistake and that they are willing to eat $16 million if if it means making the team better in the future. And that's something the Royals are just not willing to do. So that would make me think maybe things are a little bit different. Maybe John Sherman is having an impact, and they're willing to move on from their mistakes quicker in the service of trying to make the team better and better faster.
Did they cut? They cut Omar Infante owing the rest of that year that they cut him and a whole nother year.
I
Right?
believe so. It was
That's
like
the longest they've ever cut.
12 or
That's the
14
most they've
million.
eaten.
It's close. But in that
I don't know
case,
about total dollars was probably less because of inflation and everything back in the day, but in a season and a whole nother season is the furthest they've gone. Before that, they'd had a couple of guys they'd eaten it on, but they'd always done it in that final year.
Right.
And Infante, they finally bit the bullet and said, okay, we'll do it. So there is a precedent that sometime next year they would actually make that move if they
on the one hand, give the credit for the Royals for doing that. And hey, they won a World Series because they acknowledged that they had to let Omar Infante go. On the other hand, though, precisely because they were going to the play contender, the roster spots themselves were so much more precious. It's much easier for the Royals because they're not expecting to win next year to justify to themselves that keeping Hunter Dozier around is not hurting their chances of contention, and that it means leaving a player in the minor leagues who can develop down in the minors. There are other considerations that they can use as an excuse to keep Hunter Dozier down because wins and losses in the immediate term don't matter.
Right.
And that would be aggravating, but that's what I expect them to do.
They're going to matter very soon for this ball club. Who on this team right now is going to be on this team when this organization goes back to the postseason, right? We do think that there's enough talent that, and with the expanded playoffs that we're looking at the next few years for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, but there's always a chance of pulling in Orioles and contending next year, and I'm not going to rule out a huge step forward with the pitching if they overhaul the pitching staff. But realistically, at least 2 years, right? Let's even just look 2024. Who on this team is somebody you see in the everyday lineup in 2024? We can go position by position here. There are several guys that I would say yes will be there. Obviously, I think Bobby Witt, where shortstop, third base, center field, he'll be in that lineup. I can say that with confidence. I would say the number 2 bet for me personally would be Vinny Pasquantino. I really feel like he's shown us enough with the bat. He will be somewhere, first base or DH. I would say MJ Melendez, although assuming they don't trade him, this gets back to the conversations we've had in the past and ties into the whole Bobby Witt thing about like not preparing for what you do with a player whose position is already taken, or there's some positional uncertainty, because he would have had a lot more value as an everyday catcher on the trade market than this sort of jack of all trades and master of none he is now, where he's catching, he's playing left field, he's not really excelling anywhere defensively, but the bat will play. The bat will absolutely play. I would actually put him in that category. Maybe I feel like I'm high man on the Michael Massey totem pole, but I really like Michael Massey. There's no margin for error there, because if you're a second baseman and you know can't play the position at an above average level, there's nowhere else to go. He doesn't have the bat to move to first base or left field. But the glove has been impressive, and the bat has been at least adequate and maybe a little bit better. I actually think Michael Massey could be a starting second baseman. We're talking about 2 years from now. He's 24 years old. So yeah, absolutely. He'll be in his prime in 2 or 3 years. And then I would put Drew Waters in that category. At least you can at least optimistically hope for him to be,
Right.
playing whether it's center field or a corner outfield position. I mean, it hit his first major league home run today. And it was a hanging curveball, and he didn't do what Ryan O'Hearn does and punches a single. He dropped his bat head and had a nice launch angle on it, and he knew right away that he hit it. Like that, you can see that the change in his approach to the plate compared to the guy that was with the Atlanta Braves. I really like Drew Waters. The fact that he's a switch hitter, all of that, I really enjoy what he's doing. The question mark to me, the big I don't know, would be Nick Pratto, because I just don't know if the strikeouts are going to eat him alive, or if he can get those under control, because the rest of the package is tasty. The defense,
Right.
the power, the plate discipline. He's really a boomer bust for me, and I can't decide yet.
Yeah, I would add so along the position side, I don't know what they've got to go trade for what they need if they're not moving some of those position guys. Right? Like, what are they moving? Like the trade that hurts. Right here, that's the part that for me, when they had Will Myers that they could move while they
Right.
already had all these bats in front of them. The middle infield, what seemed like the stacked middle infield last year, has now eroded to they almost have none. Right? It's all question marks now because Nicky Lopez has regressed. He's not anybody's idea of an everyday shortstop. Bobby Witt Jr. has proven not to be able to play short, and Adalberto Mondesi's proven to not be able to stay healthy. They've gone from having 3 guys that in the offseason you could, I wouldn't have said that about Mondesi, but in the offseason you could have said, okay, all these guys have value, to devaluing all 3 of them. In 1 year, all 3 of them are worth. Is Bobby Witt Jr. worth more now, or was he worth more last year?
That's a really good question. I would say it's actually really close, because on the one hand, he's not excelled like the other 2 elite guys in the on the American League prospect list, in Adley Rutschman and Julio Rodriguez. I feel like those guys have definitely advanced their careers, but at the same time, top prospects fall on their face more than we care to admit. So the fact that he has held his own offensively, um, I would say that even with the concerns that are there, I don't think that his stock has dropped, but I just don't think it's moved forward.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's dropped a little because the analytics community is saying, okay, where's the on base, and it's not there. And so I think that knocks him down a little bit. It's still extraordinarily valuable player. And that's where, the Royals, they won't move anyone that they think might be good. Right. And I'll go back to the Will Myers trade that they made, to get James Shields and to get Wade Davis.
Mhm.
Will Myers was known as kind of an ass. I mean, they as a guy, I don't think they liked him as a guy. There was, as soon as they traded him, everyone was like, "Oh, all this stuff started leaking out about how they're happy to have him out of the mix," and they love these guys too much, and so to think that they're going to suddenly move one of them is hard for me to believe, right? But they've got to do something with this.
Well,
Team.
they do here. Well, part of the problem also is that, like, when you made a trade that hurts, you probably, ideally, you would include pitchers in that mix, because young pitchers will break your heart, and if you can figure out which of your pitchers are not likely to break through, those are the guys that you want to move while they still have value. Well, basically every pitching prospect in this organization has completely fallen flat on their face. So the problem isn't that even at this point isn't even primarily that the Royals are in love with the guys and don't want to trade him. It's that aside from the guys that they actually believe in, and if they believe in Michael Massey or Pasquantino or even like a Michael Garcia, if they believe in those guys, yeah, don't trade the guys you believe in. But the problem is they don't have anybody else. The talent in the system has dropped to the point where they don't have the excess where they can say, let's sort our guys into, because this I remember when the Will Myers trade was made, that's like they almost had I think they had drew up a list on a chalkboard or on a whiteboard of all of the prospects in the system, and they kind of separated them into, okay, these are the guys that we feel are the core of our franchise going forward, and can we separate out Will Myers and Jake Odorizzi and Mike Montgomery from that list, right? Because as much as we talk about Will Myers, Odorizzi and Montgomery were both, well-regarded prospects. The prospect shine had already fallen off of Mike Montgomery at that point. If they had traded him a year or two before, they could have gotten a lot more for him. But they looked at their farm system and they had enough talent left, even after trading those guys, that they felt like it would not inhibit their rebuilding process. They were absolutely right. My concern is right now, I'm not sure they can make a trade that hurts. They're going to have to make a trade that really hurts, because they're going to have to trade from the guys who they're actually in the major leagues right now and are part of that core. And I don't think they can do that. And so I don't know. I'm more skeptical today that they're going to make that trade that hurts this winter than I was a couple of months ago. I think at this point, if they're going to do something dramatic, what I want to see them do is to make the free agent signing that I don't want to say hurts, maybe hurts their wallet, but the payroll can handle it. And that's something we should talk about, is like, if you're going to go out and get talent, and especially if you can't trade for it, who's the free agent out there that you want to target that you can afford and that will not blow up in your face?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because who is it? Who's the guy? Because first, let's talk about who you could go, like, this is the guy I want. This is the guy that makes his team, finishes or really boosts his team, the guy they need the most. Then let's talk about whether or not that guy would ever consider signing in Kansas City. Okay. Who's your guy?
So the first thing is, it has to be a pitcher, right? Like, I think,
and I object to that as the basis for what you're about to say.
Well, I think, for one thing, they've proven, at least right now, they cannot develop pitchers. If they're going to try and win in the short to medium term, I don't think they can do it with the pitching they have in the system and their ability to develop those pitchers as it is. They need to go out and get at least one starting pitcher, number 3 or better. You could certainly go out and get a hitter, but also, I mean, they have enough. If you're trying to be judicious with your payroll, the best way to do that is to play rookies or pre-arbitration guys at as many positions as possible, because that frees up payroll for stars, or for at least quality free agents elsewhere. The stars and scrubs strategy of spending lots of money on 2 or 3 core guys and then league minimum on all your rookies, that will work, and that is what teams like the Rays will do. So I think they should go out and get a pitcher. And there are 2 names that I could throw at you. I agree. They're probably not going to get, I don't know, if Garrett Cole was out there this year, they're not getting Clayton Kershaw. We know this, right? We have to be realistic, but I do think when it comes purely to the money involved, they can go out and get a 15 to 20 million a year pitcher. They can. They have to choose wisely, but they can. And I'm going to give you 2 names of guys that I think that they should at least strongly consider. All right. And I'll start with the second tier option and then go to the first tier option. The first name I will mention is Sean Manaea. It's a name you know well. It's a name the Royals know well. Okay. They drafted him. They liked him. They developed him to a degree. They traded him in a trade that is one of the all-time win-win trades in the 21st century. Both teams, I'm sure, are very happy with how that worked out for them. And he's now reaching free agency. He is a left-hander. He'll be 31 right before next season. The A's traded him to the Padres this year, and he's not having a great season by ERA. He's at a 5.27 ERA, but his FIP is a lot better at 4.58. His strikeout to walk ratio is better than 3-1. He's basically been home run prone. I could see him being a buy low candidate. He has, basically taken the ball on every turn through the rotation now, going back to 2020. So he had some arm issues earlier in his career. Some major arm issues, but he's been healthy now for going on his third season. This is the second tier option. I'm not giving this guy a 5-year deal. I might not give him a 3-year deal, but could you give him a 2-year contract with decent money and a chance, if he reestablishes himself, to get another big payday in 2 years? I like him as a good option. I think the guy I really am intrigued by, that I think might be in the Royals price range, is Mike Clevenger. And you probably know that guy as well. He pitched for the Indians, pitched very well for several years, was traded to the Padres, and then blew out his arm and missed all of last season. Tommy John surgery. If you're going to have Manaea had shoulder issues, which is a little more concerning. Clevenger had Tommy John, came back in May of this year. His velocity is down a tick, but it's still averaging, I think, 93.5, which is down from before his injury, but is actually right where his velocity was in 2017 and 2018 when he was one of the best pitchers in the AL Central. And his peripherals look good. In 89 innings, 29 walks, 77 strikeouts. His strikeout rate's a little down, which is not surprising for a guy coming back from Tommy John. His command is there. And you figure, coming off of Tommy John next year, he's going to be at 100%. That one is, I think, a bigger gamble because he's going to need at least a 3-year deal, maybe even 4 years, maybe $15 million a year. That's, if the Royals want to go gamble Gil Mesh-like, that's the Gil Mesh signing right there, is to go out and get a Clevenger and hope that he's a number 2 starter for you and makes this, rebuilding that rotation that much easier.
All right. I'm going to take a different tact. I love this one. It would be nice if Manaea can come. I assume come back. Would be nice. Would be nice. I highlighted what Mark said. I never, ever want to hear the words, "we can't afford it" again, unless they're going to self-fund their downtown stadium. I get that. I do think at some point that it is going to be time for the ownership to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to acquiring players. That, in free agency cannot be leprosy to this organization. They've got to be able to get out there and go get it. For me, and I hate it. My thunder got stolen. I'm going to get to it here in a second. I'll go back to what I said. I object to the idea that it has to be a pitcher. First of all, there's somebody in here. Here, this one right here. From I'm Big in Japan. By the way, I still love that handle. If Sherman doesn't believe in this group enough to spend big, then just reset it all and change regimes. Don't waste more time. I think that's a great point. If it's like, no, you got to win before I'll back you money wise, then you gotta. It's time to eject. You've got your answer on what you need to do with the organization. I object to the idea of pitching because pitching is too combustible. And I also object to the idea that this team offensively is set. I get what Cam says, and Cam said it up here. He said, listen, you can get by with an average offense. It's hard to get by with average pitching. I agree with Rany. I do too. But I also don't think you have an average offense. And I think the more stable, just as we would say up high, when you have a high draft pick, you need to take the best bat available. When you go into free agency, you can't come away with nothing if you're this team. And a rehab project on Clevenger, I love the idea of it, but how much money are we talking about, right? My guy, and it was, like I said, my thunder was stolen. I wanted to find Danny Tartable. Okay, that's what I wanted to find. That's what I think they need. I think they need a right field bat.
Can I say that I think signing Danny Tartable would be a terrible idea because he's about 65 years old and probably won't out-hit Ryan O'Hearn, although I'm not ruling it out.
Right, and they traded for Tartable. I'm aware of that. If anyone's rushing to the keyboard to correct me, I know they traded
highly underrated hitter in Royals history.
Scott Bankhead to the Mariners for Danny Tartable, and he gave them a 30+ at a time when 30 really meant something. A 30+ home run bat to stick in the middle of their lineup, and he's part of what allowed Bo Jackson to shine because you had a legit professional big league stick that could also play right field. That's what I really want. I don't like any outfielder that's scheduled for free agency. None. I want a bat because I don't think the lineup's good enough. I think they need to get the lineup fixed before they can even get to the pitching. And the only bat that I looked through that I
I'm
came
really
across.
curious to hear this name now.
The only bat that I came across, and I'll give Cottman, said my dream free agent is Dansby Swanson. And it sounds ludicrous for the reasons we said earlier, because all we've heard about is all their depth in the middle infield. None of them are shortstops. This guy is. He's 28 and a half years old, I think, right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting some prime years. I don't love it. Like I said, I'm more intrigued by what you could go out and find and trade. But he's the only offensive free agent that I think. Listen, I like Aaron Judge, but somebody's going to be giving 6 years of downside money to Aaron Judge. That can't be the Kansas City Royals, right? I'd love to be able to, say, okay, let's go splash it around. Carlos Rodon is the name I would come to on pitching. It's going to be very expensive. I don't think the Royals need to have $15 million arm on the DL, and most pitchers end up on the DL. So I think that's a problem. I think you're more at a point where they're pitching. They've got to figure out who can fix the guys they've got, because the arms are going to have to come. We talked about who's on this team. Somehow Daniel Lynch has to be one of the arms that's pitching in a playoff game for this team. Brady Singer is showing himself well. But Bolin, they've got to figure that out internally, whether that's firing the entire regime or the top of this regime getting new people to handle the pitching. But I think they've got to make this batting order fit. And if they put him at shortstop, it stops all the nonsense of Bobby Witt Jr. trying to play short. He can go play third. It stops the nonsense of sitting around waiting for Adalberto Mondesi to ride in and save the day. You can either sign him and send him to the outfield, or you can just finally be done with him. Like that, to me, at least forces the organization to head down a path where it starts to fit. And that's it. Again, not enamored with it. Don't love the free agent class that's out there, but to me, that at least starts answering some questions and forces them to start sending some people to some other positions. And if you're sending Mondesi out to outfield and you don't have a place to play MJ Melendez, right, and you're not going to fart around with Nick Prado running around, you have to start making it fit. And to me, that starts to make it fit.
So, I mean, to me, Dansby Swanson, it's definitely a very creative signing, because what you're basically saying is we're not going to. This is not the Danny Tartable route. This is not like we're adding one big bat to the lineup. This is what you're trying to do is thread the needle and improve the team two ways: by adding a bat and adding a glove, by upgrading the defense. Because Swanson, I mean, his career. Keep this in mind. Swanson's career OPS plus is 94. Now, since 2020, since he turned 26, his peak years, his OPS plus is 107. He's at 266 batting, 328 on base, and 447 slug over the last 3 seasons. Now, that will definitely play, and he is a good defensive shortstop. Not elite, but certainly average to above. And so you're adding a guy who will lengthen the lineup. He's not going to be a difference maker in the lineup, but if you believe in Pasquantino and Prado, maybe you say we already have those guys in the lineup. And you look at the 2015 Royals, and they didn't have a big bopper. There was no 170 OPS plus guy in the 2015 Royals lineup. What they had was.
Do you think, like, if you put the 2015 Royals on the field right now, is that team going to win a championship?
Well, the game has changed so much. No, but a lot of that is because the ball has changed more than anything else. I think the ball has changed, and that changes, the importance of power. I mean, that team, you cannot win with an extreme contact lineup like that one was. But the Royals themselves have changed their philosophy. They are not extreme contact. This team doesn't have an elite contact rate. They're not great at the strikeouts. They're I think above average, but certainly not one of the best contact teams of all time. But they're drawing walks and they're hitting bombs. The thing about as much as I've talked about the walk rate this year, what may even be more important in the long run is how many of the guys in this lineup, up and down the lineup, can hit the long ball. They do have guys who swing for the fences. I mean, the 2014 team went to the World Series and they hit 95 home runs the whole season. I could see the next if this lineup comes together in 2 years and they go to the playoffs, or 3 years, they're going to hit twice as many home runs, if not more, because you've got guys in this lineup who can hit 20, 25 home runs up and down the lineup. And my point is,
come on, can we settle down on that for a minute?
I didn't say 30 or 40, but 20 to 25. Melendez, Prado, Pasquantino. I think maybe Drew Waters gets there. There are certainly Bobby Witt.
They have 117 home runs right now, which puts them tied for 23rd, which is also tied for 25th. It's a three-way tie. They're only the Tigers have only hit 80. My God, I didn't realize how bad it is there. 29th, the Cleveland is Cleveland at 101, which is kind of a kick to the teeth of the idea that you can't win without hitting home runs because they're in contention.
When you talk about the 2015 Royals today, that is the Cleveland Indians. The Cleveland Indians have the best strikeout rate. They are a contact hitting team without much power, and it's not really working great for them. They're struggling.
But here's my point: 117 home runs. They're only 16 ahead of 29th. I'm going to throw the Tigers out as just being a hot mess. They're only 16 above the Guardians in 29th, who have 101. Do you know how many they are from first?
Well, I mean, they're practically behind Aaron Judge by himself. So I'm going to guess it's, they're a good 70 home runs.
93.
93, yeah.
Yeah, they're 93 home runs behind the Yankees. They are 86 behind the Braves for second. Hell, the Brewers, small market Brewers, 185. And I'm not who are the guys that can hit 20 or 25 up and down this lineup? Witt Jr., he's doing it. Perez, he's done it.
Salvi. Pasquantino can do it.
I agree.
I believe it. He's 20. Prado can do it.
At the expense of what?
Okay, if he my point is if he pans out. Obviously, if the strikeouts don't eat him alive, but even if he struggles, he's going to struggle as he hits 190 or 210. But the power will be there. I mean, he's hit 7 home runs now? Yeah, 7 home runs in 42 games. That's a 27 home run pace.
So, I like Prado. And I would think with some tweaks that they ought to be able to make him a 240, 325, 440 type of, 765 Gold Glove caliber, 765 OPS Gold Glove caliber first baseman. I can see that. Pasquantino then can DH. I'm with you. I can see it. I don't know that they can get there with him. I mean, they're not sold on him.
I said myself, he's the guy I'm not sure about. I'm just saying the type of approach he has at the plate is he sells out for power at the expense of strikeouts. My point is the Royals are not the 2015 in terms of their approach to the plate, which, given the way the game has changed, is an appropriate adjustment.
Right. And I don't want to bog down on Prado. I'm with you. I like Prado. My point is they don't. Like they won't. They I think are still stuck in the batting average. The batting average.
I think the problem is it's more fundamental than that. The problem is they are committed to playing Hunter Dozier 5 or 6 times a week, and so somebody has to sit. And I mean it. And they're committed to starting Ryan OHearn once or twice a week. And so we see these lineups where Nick Prado's not in the line. I mean, Pasquantino's been on the IL, and they still are not playing Nick Prado every day. Right. And there's still days where, they'll put Hunter Dozier in right field and, okay, look, and Drew Waters is on the bench. And it's like, you brought this guy up. He's got 10 times the chance of being a part of the next Royals contending team as a starting player than Hunter Dozier. Why on earth is Hunter Dozier in the lineup over Drew Waters ever? And the answer is they don't want to admit the mistake they've made. And that is what is impeding this more than, whether or not they believe in Nick Prado's ability to hit for average. I still think they believe in Nick Prado, but they want to make Hunter Dozier happy. They want to get something out of that investment. But your point about brings us back to Dansby Swanson. Like the idea there is my comparison to the 2015 Royals is that there was no one elite bat in the lineup, but you had 7 above average hitters in that lineup. Basically, from once they got Ben Zobrist and they lengthened the lineup. So from Ben Zobrist batting second all the way down to trying to think who was batting 8th that year, because you had Alcides Escobar and Alex Rios were the 2 automatic outs in the lineup, but the rest of the lineup, I think Salvi might have been batting 8th. It was like 7 guys with an OPS plus of 100 or more. And that is the idea. If you bring in Dansby Swanson, you're not getting an elite hitter, but you're getting a good hitter at a difficult defensive position. And that improves your defense and lengthens your lineup. So I like the idea. My concern with him is he's not going to be cheap. I mean, he's only, like you said, he's only 28 years old. He's going to be one of the younger free agents out there. I think he's going to probably get more money than Mike Clevenger. And if the money is the same, and you think that Clevenger is healthy, I think the Royals will probably benefit from the pitcher more than the hitter.
Yeah. And I think I get that. I just, if the pitcher goes on the DL, where are you?
That's absolutely the risk, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's why in the aggregate, of course, I always want to go with the hitter as a free agent. When I make a trade for a guy, I always want to trade for the hitter over the pitcher. Hitters are when in the draft, I want hitters over pitchers. But at some point, you have to get pitching in this organization, and if you don't trust the Royals to be able to develop themselves or trade for, the only solution is to pay through the nose for it. It worked for the Cubs.
Brady Singer. And what other pitcher is on this team when they're in the playoffs that's currently a part of this organization?
I mean, you said David Lynch. Sorry, David Lynch. It feels like a David Lynch movie sometimes.
Yes.
Daniel Lynch is that guy, right? And I think with better coaching, I think Daniel Lynch can still be at least a league average starter in the major leagues. And if you get Singer and Lynch to both be average plus starters in the majors, that 2018 draft still looks pretty good. It's hard to get two, everyday starting pitchers out of any draft. So even if Bubic and Kowar and I mean, we haven't seen Jonathan Bolin. We'll see if he, coming back, he's just back from his Tommy John. Maybe he'll turn into something, or Jonathan Heasley. But even if none of those guys pan out, if you get Singer and Lynch to pan out, then that's a successful draft right there. That's the number two guy. I think, to me, Chris Bubic is a dart throw at this point. He's shown success. He's still young enough. It would not shock me if he made a big step forward, but I'm certainly not relying on. I'm not depending on it. But the sad thing is, beyond that, I mean, there are a couple guys in the bullpen who I think can be, future guy. Dylan Coleman, I think, has a better chance of it than anybody in that bullpen to be, still dominant in 2 or 3 years and be, if not a closer, a really good 8th inning guy. But there's no one else in on the Royals, and maybe no one else in the entire organization, that I'm confident will be an above average starter in 2 or 3 years. That's why I think you have to go outside the organization to get one. And
that's what's scary.
It is.
Right. And that's terrifying. And I'll add the other one is, they seem to, I don't know why, Dayton Moore seemed to acknowledge 2 years ago that they needed to become more transactional. And then this year he dug into a trench, and pretty much his comments were like, people are going to say we need to be more transactional, and they can just say it. I mean, he did an about face. And that's the other thing is that, like, as we sit and look at it, like, how do you think the Royals would answer that question on the pitching? If I said, well, what guys? They would say Singer, Lynch, Bubic. You think they'd say Heasley?
Probably.
Do you think that
he's a bulldog? They would say. They'd ignore the fact that his strikeout to walk ratio is barely 1.4. They'd be like, he's a bulldog.
Yeah. Max Castillo, I don't think they've been around enough to completely fall in love with. Although
but it's funny you mention him, because you talk about the transactional thing, and yes, they've backed away from that. And what's so aggravating is, look at the transactions they did make. Even after waiting 3 years too long to trade Whit Merrifield, they did finally trade Whit Merrifield. Do you think the Blue Jays want to have that back now? I mean, Whit Merrifield, what's he done for Toronto? Nothing. And I mean, Summer Taylor, the second guy in that deal, was injured at the time of the trade. They knew that. He's probably not going to be back in time for the season, so we won't even see him until next year. But Max Castillo, I'm intrigued. Consider me intrigued. And, like, forget the service time. I think Max Castillo next year, which is the last year of Whit Merrifield's contract, might be a more valuable major leaguer than Whit Merrifield. The Royals, for kick dragging and screaming with needles in their hand to trade Whit Merrifield finally, and it looks like being transactional has already paid off. Andrew Benintendi, it's unfortunate he fractured the hamate bone in his hand. There's hope he'll be back in time for the playoffs. But he wasn't lighting the world on fire even before the injury in New York. The Yankees have been, like, terrible ever since that trade. Not his fault, but the point is, the Royals traded him at the right time. Of the 3 guys they got, Beck Way just in the last outing, 8 no-hit innings, 4 walks, but 10 strikeouts. The Royals, again, forced to be transactional, and it's paying off for them. And they just don't seem to learn. It's okay to make trades to improve your team. That this is a completely viable way to improve your roster. And every time it feels like pulling teeth with them.
Well, and I listen, we're not going to adjudicate the situation, but they traded 2 guys that were part of the Toronto 10. Okay, and I know they were pissed about how it came down, and if that continues, then maybe there will be, maybe they walk on Hunter Dozier. He was in that mix. Maybe MJ Melendez is more exposed. Some of the guys we're talking here about why does he keep getting scratched out of the lineup?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, here's something else we should mention. And by the way, shout out to Alec Lewis and happy trails to him. He was,
Yes,
he's
he survived. He got off
he,
the beat and is
he,
now covering the Vikings.
Yes, he's after 3 years of training, covering a downtrodden franchise with angry fans, he's now moved to the next level, because I'm not sure there's a higher level than the Minnesota Vikings. So good luck to him. But at this point, the coverage of this team in terms of the everyday beat writing is sparse, and that's no one's individual fault. This is it's the fault of journalism as an industry, print writing as an industry for the last 20 years. Newspapers are struggling. You look at the Kansas City Star sports section today versus 15 or 20 years ago. There's just no comparison. And that's not any one specific person to blame. That's societal forces. That's the internet. But the point is we're not getting the kind of information. We don't have as many people digging into why is MJ Melendez not playing. Why did he sit 3 days in a row when it seemed like he was completely healthy? And as like you, an eager fan and analyst of this team, but not somebody who is capable of covering the team up close on a daily basis. That's something we're going to probably have to struggle to deal with, is the fact that we're just not going to have as much information as we used to. And I unfortunately cannot answer why MJ Melendez. There's definitely something. It's a little bit strange. There's no question. There's no reason why he should ever be out of the lineup, at least certainly against a right-handed pitcher. So there's something going on there, and I wish I knew. And I'm worried that we may never know.
Yeah, and that's where I say, well, there's somebody that they may be willing to part with.
If they do trade him, we will definitely look back at the fact that he was not in the lineup for several days, and say, oh, you know what, the signs were there.
Yeah. Rany, great stuff as always. Looking forward to seeing you and Joe Sheehan on Friday. If you follow Rany on Twitter, if you don't, you should. Make sure you I've got him. It's at Jazayerli, Jazayerli. And he and Joe Sheehan, 2 of the founders of Baseball Prospectus, are going to be in town. It's Rany's yearly pilgrimage to Cottman Stadium. He'll be on my radio show on Friday on Sports Radio 810 WHB. You can catch that at 810WHB.com. We podcast all that as well. So great weekend of Royals baseball coming up, Rany, in town, in person, and then we'll break it all down on the next Cottman Corner. That one Sunday at 10 o'clock. So busy times as we start to tiptoe our way towards the off season, which hopefully is going to be a very big one. So for Rany Jazayerli, the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro. Thanks for joining us here on Cottman Corner.